He's trying to take the pencil out of my mouth. He loves the two pencils so much. No. 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 Hello and welcome to The Fat Squirrel Speaks. Today is Friday, September 13th. This is episode 253, take 2. I am Amy Beth, also known as The Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and The Fat SQRRL on Instagram. We're not really tilty. We're just at an angle and angles are happening. So that's why this is behind us off, but we're just going to go with it, kids, because as I said, take 2. I am your hostess, Amy Beth, also known as The Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and The Fat SQRRL on Instagram. Stop trying to steal my pencil. Here's my co-host today, apparently. Gustav the Destroyer. Can you say hi? See, he just had a recent haircut, and we think he looks a little gargoyle-y after his haircuts. Annie's right there, don't worry. I love Annie more. But she doesn't like to be picked up, so she doesn't like to be on camera. So take 2. I actually I've had a week of just like, you know, mild calamities. I had a sick kid for the day that I was supposed to record, and then she's fine. And then I had a day of insane recovery from sick kid in terms of like errands, and I broke my phone. It's fixed, it's fine. And all of those things. And so then I was like, okay, it's okay. I'm going to record Thursday. It's great. It'll be fine. And so then Thursday, my husband was home from work sick. And so I knew that I had to record a podcast because I knew I needed to get out because I have a shop update today now. And so I was just in a grouchy mood. And I edited it and was like ready to push the publish, and I was just like, you know what? Let's not do this. So I'm going to re-record the beginning part of the podcast. I'm going to leave the end as it was because I'm talking about knitting and stuff, and so then it is like I was in a fine mood by then. But I was actually okay. It was just like I felt like the energy was still in there. I didn't want the internet to carry you bad energy, so I'm just going to record this part again. Also, I'm not entirely sure I didn't scream at the dogs and forgot to edit it out at the beginning. So, you know, rather than try to listen through it, because I already did edit it, but then I was not sure if I got that or not. Just like, let's just redo this. Listening to myself the first time around to edit is bad enough. I can't do it again. Especially when there's all that energy in there. So... This week's podcast will contain shenanigans. It will contain knitting, no spinning, and it will contain shameless self-promotion at the end. Just FYI's. There's a shop update tonight, if I even get this to you today. And then there'll also be an update next week. So, yay! And if you're getting this on Saturday or Sunday and you're like, just check the shop, because I did not advertise at all. As I mentioned, I am behind it. Or maybe I'm in front of it, but I'm not on it. Either way. So, let's talk about shenanigans. So today is September, right? Today is the month of September. But today's September, and so we actually got to go apple picking. We went last weekend. While it's now turned oppressively hot again, we did have some beautiful weather in terms of like, even though it was getting warm in the day, it was at least getting cool in the evenings. So like when we got up in the morning, it was only like 63 or 64 degrees. I can handle September being in the 80s when it's in the 60s in the morning. Because, you know, like as long as you walk out and feel like the breath of Satan upon your face, it's a little bit more like doable. The 80 degrees, the 90 degrees. It's 90s today. But anyway... Last week when we went apple picking, it was cool in the morning and it was lovely. And we went to pick Portland's. We went to pick Cortland's. They're my favorite applesauce apple. They cook down really super soft, but they're still tart enough to give a good complex flavor. Like a lot of the I prefer a tart apple, but a lot of the tart apples are also a very firm apple. And so, I mean, everything will cook down eventually, but the Cortland's cook down fast enough that I think they still retain a lot of their good flavor. So we went and got a bushel of those, which was super fun. I love to go apple picking so much. It gives me all of the great joy. So we did that, and then I was going to be super efficient because I knew that I had a very busy, before I knew everybody was going to get sick and I was going to break phones, and I still knew I had a very busy week this week. So I was like, I'm going to be super efficient because, you know, a bushel of apples is like a lot of apples in terms of just like the space it takes up in your home. And then also, also. But that's it, actually. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and start processing things. Because last weekend we had a very low social engagement calendar. And I thought, I'm going to be super proactive. I'm going to start saucing these. I figured I'll do half a bushel on Saturday and half a bushel on Sunday. And then I'll be all done. And won't that be exciting? I can go into my week without that like kind of lingering. So I do the first batch and can it up. And I'm just like, it's like not amazing. And if you've never had homemade applesauce, it is actually amazing. Like, it is a different creature than the canned apple or the jarred applesauce that like Mott's or whatever. Like, it is a totally different beast. And this applesauce was kind of just tasting Mottsy. Like, it was just like, I mean, it was fine, but it just didn't have the oomph. It didn't have the like little bit of, it was just kind of. And so at first I thought it was because I couldn't remember last year if I had peel. So some recipes have you core your apple, but not like core and slice your apple, but not peel it because you're going to run it through a food mill to remove the peels. Some of them have you core and peel. And I couldn't remember. I thought last year I thought, did I actually peel the apples? Because I do have this weird thing about where I think that I have in my head somewhere that the pectin in the peel kind of can have a slight clouding effect on the flavor of the applesauce. It's not huge, but I do sometimes feel that way. Maybe it's just me being crazy. That's probably 100% it. So, but the first batch I did just core and slice and cook. And I thought, maybe they're kind of tasting flat because I didn't peel. So then I thought, all right, I'll peel. So I used my like old-fashioned metal peeler, slicer, corer all in one thing, which I know everybody loves, but secretly I don't love it that much. It seems to really be best if you have a kind of specific size apple that's consistent. So for example, if you're getting your apples from the grocery store, I can imagine that it would actually be pretty amazing. But like when you pick, like some of our apples are this big and some of our apples are like this big, and whatever. It does fine because I didn't need to be meticulous with the peel because I knew I was still going to run it through a food mill. So I thought I'll just get a big bulk of the peel off. And it did work quite well for that. So the second batch, I was like, still just kind of not doing it for me. I was just very disappointed. I kept trying to kind of play with it and see if I maybe, the recipe I use is just like the ball canning recipe. I don't use quite as much sugar usually as they recommend, and it's optional. It does help lengthen your shelf life in terms of like color, texture, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I don't usually put all of it in there because usually I like it a little bit less sweet. But this was just like, again, kind of just flat. And I was like, oh, what is going on? And so that night after I had canned 18 pints of applesauce, it occurred to me. Do you know what it is? I can hear you. You're probably already out there telling me what it is. You're right. It is that. It's because in the past I procrastinated. We've picked our apples and then they've sat there for a week to 2 weeks with me being like, oh, I need to get around to that. I'm not sure. What am I going to do? Am I going to sauce them or am I going to butter them? And in that week to 2 weeks, they've further developed their own apple sugars because apples, like some other fruits, do continue to develop sugars after they've been picked and develop a more complex flavor. And that's what I was missing. So that moment that I was on the ball wasn't even that great. Shouldn't have been on that ball. I should have been way behind that ball or way in front of it. whatever, not on it. And I was, and look at what it did to me. So that just shows you. Just really should procrastinate more. So I was very disappointed that I had 18 jars of like, applesauce. But then I remembered, like, hey, I'm still relatively new to this life thing. I'm only 40. I just learned about my freezer a couple weeks ago. Just have to make the mistakes to learn from the mistakes. My mistake of gardening this year was that I did not prune my tomatoes enough, and now there's a full-on jungle that I kind of hold my breath to put my hand into to pick tomatoes from, because I'm a little concerned that somebody's going to reach out and get me. Giant orb spider. We have a big garden spider, but we also have this giant orb spider whose little torso-y body, thorax, what is that? Whatever. I can't remember my insect / spider. They're totally different. I hear you yelling at me. Could you just not with the pencil, Gus? Just let it go, man. I can't hide the pencil from you because I'm not in a okay, I'm just put it up here. Oh my gosh. This is a problem. Her abdomen is enormous. And I actually got really freaked out because I was like, ah! Because when their bodies are shaped like that, they're shaped like the Black Widow, like the mystery, the spider of death or whatever. And so I really came and looked it up quickly because I was like, oh, it's a danger spider and I can never pick the rest of those tomatoes again. Well, it's not. It's fine. But she is wicked looking. Like, she does look really wicked. By the way, all spiders are women. I don't know how they reproduce because Charlotte told me that all spiders are women now. I don't know. Anyway, what were we talking about? Gosh. I'm learning lessons. So, the lesson I learned is that I should really procrastinate more on my apple situation. So I'm going to let that other half bushel sit for at least, well, they've already almost sat for a week, but potentially 2 weeks. I'm going to keep monitoring them to make sure they're not getting pressure bruises. Because if you store your apples in like the big, like the plastic bag that they come in, they can get pressure bruising just from like the, because even a half bushel of apples weighs like 22-ish, 24 pounds depending. And so especially the ones on the bottom or wherever they are that they're getting the most, they can get pressure bruising just from being in storage. So I can just keep monitoring them to make sure they're doing okay. I'll do that this weekend and then maybe wait another week to make this the rest of my life. By the way, though, there are so many things in like the canning gardening realm that are not really cost effective. Like my tomato gardening is not cost effective in terms of direct comparison with store, like canned tomato sauce versus the tomato sauce I'm making. The tomato sauce I am making is much more expensive. Quality is a different issue altogether, which is hard to evaluate. But neither here nor there. The applesauce, however, is such a good bargain. Now, the orchard that we go to is You Pick, and it is not organic. Those apples have clearly been sprayed. They're all too gorgeous. So that is a reality in terms of its price and what have you. But in our orchard, if you buy a bushel of apples, it's $32, which means it's like $16 for those 18 pints of applesauce I made. And I feel like that's a good value. And it's superior generally, not those 18, but maybe I'll like cook with them or something. Maybe I'll just voice them off on unsuspecting strangers. No, I won't do that. But anyway, so it's actually an actual good value. And plus, no plastic. Yay! Boop, boop. Annie can't help but she wants to play because I'm down on the floor. And she's very fierce. Do you hear her? She's the only one of our dogs that is very fierce. She loves to wrestle with the peoples and actually will totally mess you up if you're not careful. Like in the wintertime, usually I put a hoodie over my hand so that she doesn't like tear me up. None of our other dogs have ever been willing to do that. They're all just like, now Gus will totally mess her up. Like he will bite her and like hang on her. Not to the point of, you know, but she will act, but when it comes to people, they're like, oh no, no, no. Annie, who is the best dog in the universe, is also horribly fierce. She's so good. Anyway, so that's our appling. And then we also did another good proactive house thing this week. I don't even want to tell you. Okay, actually it was over the holiday weekend, so it was over Labor Day weekend. I don't want to admit to you, but I'm going to, because hello, taxi cab confessions, this stupid camera. The window in my daughter's, we've been wanting to repaint Tova's room. Okay, by we I mean she. She's been wanting to repaint her room. She's almost 13. Her room is still the same paint job it was that I painted when I was pregnant, meaning it's like sky blue with white fluffy clouds sponge painted. Oh yes. Yes. Whatever, it still was cute. But for a few years she's been wanting to repaint it. A few years ago she wanted to paint it this like really mega aqua color, and I was just like, I really kind of just delayed because I was like, man, that color is intense. I mean, it would be like this color but like more opaque, and it's like, I don't know if I want to be a part of that swimming pool that you're going to be living in. So we put off. But finally we needed to do it. And one of the reasons, besides that horrific color, that I have been putting it off is because her window, underneath her window, now this damage has happened before I was here, but her window is on the side of the house where the wind blows into, like in general weather patterns, and the storm had been left open, and there was water damage underneath of her window before it was not her fault. And water damage, I don't mean like mold or anything like that. The plaster though had gotten wet, and that wall in her room, and I don't know even when it happened, to be honest. The wall in her room has this like super thick textural wallpaper on it. I'm pretty sure that I'm guessing that they put wallpaper up at some point in this house's history, because there were like some minor plastering, like over time, you know, plaster sometimes can get some hairline cracks. I don't know why there was so much wallpaper in this house over the plaster. But my room has like 38 layers, 39 layers of wallpaper on the ceiling. Whatever, it's crazy. But this specific wallpaper is that really thick kind, and so it had like bowed out from underneath the window, so we knew that the plaster underneath of it had been compromised. And so I was just like I knew it wasn't, like, again, there was no longer moisture. The window had been fixed in terms of like getting a storm on and everything like that. There was no like health issue surrounding it, so it just became like this, like, oh, I don't know how to fix that, you know, that kind of thing that just kind of like is always in the back of your head as something that needs to be done. But we finally fixed it. And let me just discuss, after watching like lots of like plastering videos, being like, whatever, people did plaster, like, and they made it themselves. And they didn't have YouTube in 1375 when they made this plaster. Okay, not the plaster in my house, obviously. But you know what I mean? I'm like, we can figure this out. Like, why is this a block in my head that this is something we can't do? Like, we can figure this out. Ultimately, though, we decided, we got it all taken apart. And then for some reason, we decided to do a drywall patch. I think my husband was just like in that, like, let's get it done. And plaster, of course, there are multiple layers that are required, and it has to dry, and like there's a whole thing that happens. So I think that's why the drywall repair happened. But whatever, it's fine. Sorry, I had to break up some dog wrestling. No. But anyway, so that was amazing. Like, there was not even like intense cursing or anything. It went so smoothly. The lath was in lovely shape. There was no issue with that. It just hits at some point that the plaster got wet and deteriorated. But the lath was in good shape, so we were able just to like get the plaster out of there, put in the drywall. It fit flush. Miracle of miracles. And we were able just to kind of do some plaster marrying on either side, and it just, yay, is done. And then she wanted to paint her room gray. We tried to paint, we painted our downstairs a few years ago, and I really wanted to paint it gray. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, oh, okay, trend wagon, I'm on you. Because quite frankly, those pictures of those gray houses are always gorgeous, right? The gray interior, and we have really big windows and big chunky molding downstairs for the most part. Let's not discuss that in this room that we are in, the crown molding was replaced with, I think, what is totally plastic. What were you doing, homeowners? There's also a popcorn ceiling in here. Okay, not popcorn, but like textury. Let's not talk about it. But anyway, so I really was in love with the gray, and I thought we have this big chunky molding that will do white. It'll be really gorgeous. And I tried like 7 different gray samples to try to get, and it just did not work. Like, it doesn't help that my husband was in the Navy, and so he looked, and it was like, that looks like you're inside the hold of a ship. And I was like, oh, now it's ruined. It was like they either looked like you had been held captive in the K-19, or like or it was just like dirty dishwater. Like, I could not get the right gray. I could not find the right undertone that made it. So she wanted to paint her room gray, and I thought, whatever, it's your room. She picked, just out of the blue, just picked the paint sample. It's perfect. It's a gray, but it has a slightly mauve undertone, and it just looks nice. It's you know, mature-ish for her age, yet it doesn't look depressing, and bleh. It still has a little bit of warmth to it. So yay, that's all done. And by the way, it was so fast to paint her room. It was the most satisfying thing ever. Like, we did that plaster, we emptied her room, did the plaster repair, did the painting, 4 hours. What? Now, her room is relatively small, and she did want her ceiling and walls to be the same color, which I was super excited about. Because she does not have crown molding in her room, and I really thought, like, oh, this is gonna be problematic, and also, like, it's just gonna look botchy when we're done. But yay. Yay! So that's all done. It was very lovely and wonderful. And then, yeah, so that's been what we've been doing. I'm sorry, just so distracted. Gus has found a thread spool that he is chewing on maliciously. And I kind of don't want to stop him, but if you hear weird clicking, that's what it is. Now, he is not an eater, knock on wood. He is just a chewer. So I'm keeping an eye on him, don't worry. But dog is such a nightmare. And he's looking at me like, do you see what he's doing? She's a bit of a narc. So then the other thing I want to talk about is what I've been reading. So I will admit that I have been on a Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time. In times of great stress and I feel too many feelings, I have a tendency to revert to high fantasy and action movies as my entertainment of choice, like, because they do not require me to feel feelings that are relevant to, like, my day. So, like The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings sometimes gets me very melancholy in terms of, like, this, like, lost history that never happened. But the fantasy of the lost history and, like, so sometimes I get a little bit melancholy about that, but it doesn't affect my mood in the day. Like, it's like a romantic melancholy, not like a overwhelming depression. So that's what I tend to, like, crawl into when I'm feeling too many feelings, or feeling more feelings than I want to feel. Not too many feelings, but just more than I really want to feel in the moment. But I've also been listening to some good stuff and reading some good stuff, and I wanted to tell you about those. So this is not going to be like an in-depth review of these things at all, but just a, hey, recommendation, and one of them will be recommendation with this pretty big caveat. But the first thing I wanted to recommend is I, upon the recommendation of Knit Spin Farm, have been listening to, or I listened to, excuse me, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Aran Sweater. It's a pretty short book. I mean, again, my library had it. Excuse me, I could not think of that very important word. My library had the audio version, and so I listened to that. I'm just going to try to see if it tells me the read time. 5 hours. So if you listen to it at 1.5 speed, much less. They did not for some reason have the ebook version, but they did have the audiobook version. And I do think it's a pretty good nonfiction for audio. It's not so dense that you feel like you gotta like back up and re-highlight or something. Or it could, I mean, obviously you could read it more closely, but that's not really where I was at. So now I am not deleting my social media accounts, but I do think it was just generally a good book to read. I am a very big, for myself, I am really like to know where the information I'm getting, not only where is it coming from, but what is the motivation behind it. And so it talks a lot about like how the information you're seeing on social media is generated in terms of, you know, the algorithms and the engagement levels that kind of create these bubbles of media that we consume. And I think it's super important to be aware of that stuff at all times. Because, you know, again, just like it's important to be aware that when you're looking at a magazine, the photographs have in all likelihood been photoshopped or enhanced in some way. Like, that's important, right? Like, to be a critical consumer. I think it's really important to like understand how you're getting this information. And there's lots of really good information in the book, but one of the things that I think I took away that'll last with me is this idea of the polarization of this media consumption, like these bubbles, these echo chambers that we get into, not only how they affect the information we're receiving, but how they inevitably erode our empathy for people who are not in the same echo chamber. And I mean, I had never thought about that. Like I know that I'm not seeing the same thing as other people, but I didn't think about how that would make me less empathetic to other people's viewpoints. But it certainly does. It's disappointing that I hadn't thought about it before, but, and I think that's another thing that's really important to remember. You know, like 30 years ago, we were kind of all watching the same nightly news. I mean, yeah, there were slightly different networks, but mostly we were getting our information from pretty similar resources. And you may subscribe to a periodical that had a left or a right leaning or what have you, but it was easier to understand how somebody might have the perspective they have. In terms of now, where oftentimes I'm like, what alien thinks that? And so just to like remember that not only does this feed us what it's feeding us, but it feeds other people completely different things. And so remember that empathy needs to be put to the forefront of our minds in terms of like, oh, I'm being cut off from that. I'm being, that there's definitely a fissure there that I need to address, that I need to have the motivation to try to go out and find that empathy. So I thought that was maybe the thing that I will take away the most. But it's always good to know where your information is coming from. I mean, like, because there's so many positive things about social media that I have utilized for my own life, that I do think overall the positives outweigh the negatives. For me, obviously everybody is different. And obviously I have a different level of skin in the game. Like, I am running a business that is attached to my social media. Instagram, not really, Facebook. But, so I mean, I have a different level of investment in the game. But just like we understood that like television was being run by commercials, we need to understand if Facebook doesn't have a product, we're the product. And so how are we being produced? How's our information? How is our input being manipulated to create profit? So it was very interesting. So I apologize if our like distance between us just changed in this edit, but things changed and moved. So then the next one I want to talk about is this book by Anuschka Rees called Beyond Beautiful. And it's a practical guide to being happy, confident, and you in a looks-obsessed world. And I think that's a pretty good description of what it is. It's not what I thought it was going to be. When I originally purchased this book, the review I read made it seem a little bit more revolutionary, made it seem a little bit more... I've been struggling a lot with the word beautiful and why we are holding on to it so tightly. Like, right? Like, we don't... I understand that lots of times when we say the word beautiful, we don't mean you are aesthetically matching rules X, Y, and Z that's been distributed from the overculture. Like, that's usually not what we mean. We usually mean like, you have really good energy, or I see this empathy you're practicing for other human beings and I find it inspiring, or your wit is awesome and it really shines through in this way. Like, we use it as shorthand to describe like way bigger concepts, right? But even though we're doing that and the context shows me that that's what we're doing, like, I just don't know why we keep hanging on to this word. And by we, I definitely include me. I try not to use this word to describe people very much anymore, but I still do. I think I'm really trying to get to a place where I describe things as beautiful, but not people as beautiful. And this is definitely a you do you. I know when I say these things, people give me a lot of pushback. I'm not judging anything that you're doing at all. This is like a personal thing that I'm struggling with. We've taken certain subcultures have taken back certain words, right? Like, there's a big push to take back the word fat and to use it as a description and not a hate-filled word that describes laziness, gluttony, stupidity, like all of the, we're using it to say what it is, like fat is fat, and to try to remove the negative connotations from that descriptive word. Like, that is very different though than the word beautiful, I think, because, essentially, like, the word beautiful never had that spiteful, hate-filled vitriol behind it. And so there's no need to disassociate it from you are matching the way the overculture wants you to look. So it always feels like it's there, even when it's not describing it at all. Like, even that's not how you're using it at all, how I'm using it at all. It's still tied up really snugly in that package. And I just want to examine like why that has been such a big part of what we want to do. Like, again, why we are encouraged to, especially as women, to invest so much time, money, and energy in creating a package that is pleasant for other people to look at versus comfortable or livable or sustainable for us as human beings. And so that's part of my disappointment in this book, is that I just misunderstood what it was about. That said, my other legitimate disappointment in this book is that in 200 pages, I mean, that's including the index, but in 200 pages of this book, which I do think has lots of positive things in it, and I will talk about those in a moment. But in 200 pages of this book, there are a total of 5 pages invested into the impact of Eurocentric beauty standards, where the author talks about hair and colorism. And there's approximately 5 pages invested in ageism, the grim saga of younger is better. There are no pages invested in what it is like to live in a disabled body. And so this book definitely is a practical guide to being happy, confident, you in a looks-obsessed world. It is not about dismantling the overculture. Which is disappointing. And it's also not about marginalized bodies, and that is sad. If it's like what early feminism did, right? Like, we're going to invest our energy in these much less marginalized humans because we think we can advance them, and we're going to leave other people behind because it's too complicated to tie our boat to theirs. And that's what it feels like, and that is disappointing. And it's a disappointment that happens over and over and over again. It's when you see very, like, small fats. So women who maybe aren't even into a lane, like a plus size range, having such a loud voice in a movement that really was started to keep marginalized bodies alive and well. I hope that's coming across to you in the way that I'm putting it out there. And so that continues to be a disappointment in this movement. Like, that again, oh, well, your body is chubby and therefore acceptable, but I mean, there is a too fat. There is a place where you are not given respect. There is that body is not deserving of health care or respect or compassion because it is existing beyond this slightly larger bubble that we would like to protect of people. Like, the bubble was this big of people we wanted to be like, oh, these people are okay. So we're like, oh, we'll make this many people okay. Maybe even this many. But these people out here, sorry, you are just not okay. And so there are a lot of great things in this book, but it does fall really short of what I think is needed. That said, as an individual human, I think it can be very helpful. Okay, for example, I have a friend who gets freaked out every time a photo is posted of her in social media. And she is a woman who is significantly smaller than me. But it just, even when she has like total editorial control of the photographs that go out, she still really has a lot of problems seeing herself in photographs. And so in this book, there is an entire chapter about not only like there are actual actionable steps to help you deal with looking at yourself in photographs, but there are also just literal, like, factual things that tell you, that show you that generally women are have a complete disconnect of what their body looks like to them versus how it looks to other people. There's an actual real thing about, like, in terms of seeing yourself in a photograph, versus a mirror, in terms of like your orientation is flipped. And so there is a big disconnect between your brain, because it's not used to seeing you in that way. And so it's disconcerting to you. Just like when you were younger and you started to hear your voice on like an answering machine or something, or like on a tape recorder, or, okay, now that you're young, you're hearing it in different ways, but you know what I mean, on a video podcast. For a very long time, it was like, I don't want to hear that. It's not my voice. And that's the same reaction we have when we see a video, like or a photo of ourselves. It's a very like, and it's because there is an actual break in our understanding that's disconcerting to us, like regardless of how you feel about your body, because that's your voice, that's something totally different. Like, it still is like, it's alarming. And so it like evokes that kind of visceral reaction of disconnect. So there's lots of great information about that. So there's lots, and so that's just one example. And so I would give this book to her 75 times for holidays. I would say, yes, please take this book. I think this is what you need to get you started. And I think that's a great thing. It's a get you started. Like, if you're just now starting to question, or you're in the earlier stages of realizing that the dissatisfaction you have with your body is created by unknown entities, and is given to you so that you will be a better consumer. If you're in that place of like working through those beginning stages, I think it's a great resource. There are actually actionable steps in each chapter. about things you can do. It's not just like, well, you should like yourself more, because as we all know, that is completely unhelpful. But for example, there is a section on the confidence ladder, how to get over any fear step by step. And it's very similar to Amber Carnes, who is a yogi, did an Instagram post, which was amazing. It was just a little Instagram post, but it was super awesome. She talks about how she has the B belly versus the D belly. So women's bodies tend to fall into, like, you have one belly or you have two with a very distinct line at the waist. And she's a B belly. I'm a B belly. And she's never felt comfortable wearing a shirt tucked into pants with like a belt or what have you. It just always kind of made her cringe. And so she talks about how she realized that this was a thing that she had and how she wanted to get over it, and that she took actionable steps to do so. She started wearing tucked in shirts around her house. Maybe not even all day, but just for a while. And then she started wearing them longer in the house. And then she decided that she was going to do an errand where you're going to be in and out and you're probably not going to see anybody you know. And do that and see what happens. Like, really evaluate it. Like, when you get home, like, what happened? Was I mocked? What went around me in the world? And then just, again, going maybe to the grocery store. And then, so again, you're not really probably going to see people you know, but it's a longer trip out. Okay. And then so that eventually you get to the place where you can wear that without even thinking about it. And I did it this summer with shorts for me. I think I'm still kind of on the, I'm still on the path. Like, I don't know that I would wear shorts immediately to like a social gathering like today. But it really does work. Like, I wore them, didn't even wear shorts in the house. And I wore them in the house, and then I wore them out to a little errand, and then a bigger errand, a bigger and a bigger. So it does really work. And so it gives you just one example of like actionable steps that you can take. It has really good succinct points in terms of like, she has a section about cosmetic surgery, a section about beauty routines, and those were helpful to me as somebody who does not participate in a beauty routine, who doesn't invest in that. Like, it helped me not to understand more other people's investment in it, in terms of like, because there's this whole thing, right? Like, we're no longer told, like, advertising is no longer telling us, it's not 50s advertisement where it was like, well, your friends might not be hanging out with you anymore because you have gray hair, and gray-haired people are less fun and interesting. So maybe dye your hair and your friends will want to hang out with you more. Like, that's no longer, it's literally, like, that's not verbatim, but that is a summation of a commercial for hair dye. But so anyway, so there's no longer this like this like very explicit tie between this will make you attractive and therefore more acceptable. We now have repackaged that message to do this because you'll feel more confident in yourself, but really it's still the same message. It's just been repackaged in a way that makes it more palatable. And so it talks about like examining, like, are you doing this thing because you feel good about it? You think it's fun. You think it's playful. You think it's an expression of who you are. Or are you doing it so you feel more confident? But why are you feeling more confident when you're doing it? And so it has like, it has a literal, like, these are things you can do to determine what your motivations are. You know, is it something that you do regardless of how much time you have? Is it sometimes, you know, there's all this. And so that was very helpful to me, even as somebody who doesn't participate in that, just to understand more, like, how, you know, because sometimes I'm like, I don't understand that line between I'm doing this to make myself feel confident, and the reason I'm feeling confident is because I am so aware of the gaze. So that was very interesting to me. And there were lots of good stuff. There was like, the section on style I found to be very personally motivating in terms of like my house dress revolution. Sorry, I'm back. I had to answer the phone call. My doctor was calling to tell me that my pap was normal. So ultimately, I think this is a really good resource for some people. I just wish it was a really good resource for all people. Does that make sense? So, Beyond Beautiful by Anuschka Rees. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to show you, so now we're on to knitting. So the next thing I'm going to show you is my Nordiska sweater. So here it is on my human body. So here's my Nordiska on my body. I do not particularly like it with this this house dress, but I didn't really have anything. I think ideally what I would kind of like is a long sleeve chambray shirt dress. I think that would be a really cute fit for under it. Not that this is bad, it's just it hits right above the pocket, which is, well, it's actually convenient. So maybe I'm okay with it. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. But you can see how it fits on me. It definitely has either zero ease or slight negative ease throughout. The pattern is written to have something crazy like 6 to 10 inches of positive ease. I love the way the pattern looked, and I would really have preferred to make mine looser. But I was working with less yarn than I would have needed to make it the positive ease selection. So I would certainly reconsider making this in a commercial yarn and making like a probably 4, maybe 6 inches bigger, just to give it that kind of like relaxed feel. That said, I still think it's fun. It just is a different way of fitting. Okay. Okay, so there's what it looks like on my body. So that is the Nordiska sweater by Caitlin Hunter. As I mentioned in that section, it is supposed to have a lot of positive ease. So it definitely fits me very differently than the designer intended. And as I said, that was partly because I hate to knit a lot of positive ease, but also partly because I knew I had a yarn shortage. So, yes. So here is my sweater. Ta-da! Gus, stop it. So mine is in Bumblebee Acre Farms. So the stripy speckly section is Hagrid, Keeper of the Keys. The yellow is Whiskey, which is an Outlander colorway. And then the purpley black is Murder of Crows. It's a Game of Thrones inspired one. I apologize, I left my knitting bag over there. So I did do differently than the pattern. My neckline is not as deep. I think the pattern is supposed to be 2 inches, but I felt like that was enough for me. Obviously, the fit is much different. I did, because I knew it was going to have a snug fit, I did add extra short rows in the bust, as well as increases and decreases around the bust. So it's a raglan. I increased normally until about halfway through my arm side, and then increased every row instead of every other row until I got to my underarm. And then I did do some decreases underneath of the bust. Not many, because I knew that my color work would probably pull in just a bit, but I did do some. While it's flat, the hem wants to roll a bit. I have not worn it more than just to try it on. When I try it on, it doesn't seem to roll, but we'll just kind of see how it goes. I may need to take that hem out and redo it. In the original pattern, the hem is in the body color, not in one of the contrast colors. But again, I knew I was running short of the main color, so I did a little bit of alteration. So yes, so the hem is darker rather than the main color. It's a contrast color because, again, I knew I was running short, and also I totally messed up. The chart is written as it should be. This pattern is knit top down, and so when I started, I was so excited to do the color work. When I started knitting it, I started at the top of the chart instead of the bottom of the chart. How many times have I knit color work? So because of that, it kind of actually worked out well, because it ended up giving me a little bit of an easier way to highlight the darker color at the bottom and work the ribbing in the contrast color rather than the main color. I did do, and then of course the sleeve, if you look at the picture, the sleeve is actually hemmed in the contrast color. So I think it worked out well. And it made me have a little bit more yarn to go. So I have tons of the yellow left, and probably 40 grams of the dark left, but very few grams of the main color. I mostly have enough to do repairs if I need to. So, I am not happy exactly with the sweater. I really should have knit positive ease into this sweater. However, that said, I think if I just let this sit and marinate for a little bit, I'll be fine with it. Because there is that whole contrast, that kind of balance between what you think something will be and then what it is. Do you know what I mean? And I think what it is fine. It's just not what I thought it would be, even though I knew better. Like, I knew I wasn't getting positive ease in there. But I don't know. You know, you're human. Mistakes are made. So I don't think I will be unhappy with it long term. It's just right now I'm kind of like, because it's not matching up what I thought it would be. But I think I will like it long term. I just need to also find the right thing to wear with it. I think will be part of the journey to liking this sweater a bit more. But it was really fun to knit. I really enjoyed the big block of color work on the hems, of the sleeves and the body. And so I'm looking forward to doing more of that kind of knitting. And I would certainly knit this again and knit it in a commercial yarn with maybe a hand dye for the contrast colors so that it could be, so that I would be more comfortable investing the money in it to get some positive ease. So there you go. And now I'll go back to the rest of the show, so it's going to look different in a second. I was very kind to you and didn't do anything different with my hair. So that was definitely for you and not just because I didn't rebraid my tiny braid today. But now we're going into the past. Future me will see you later too. Bye. The Peaceful People Cowl, which is designed by Jennifer Berg. I knit mine out of Cloudborn Sport Held Double, the pattern. The recipe is what I started to say. The pattern is written for worsted. There is a cowl. There is also a hat. Tug all this hair out. Rear. So yay. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. I was a little bit worried when I finished the bind off that it was going to do this thing. But with blocking, it seems to be laying flat. And now I've done it, it'll have the memory and just do that over and over again. Yay. So I'm very pleased. It's perfect size. Because I really like this when I'm working and our house is quite cold in the winter time. Because I can still have headphones in, but this extra warmth really helps. So, yay. She has a new hat design too, which was super cute. Whew, I think it's coming out in more like Lane or Wool People or something. So yeah, so there's that. I'm very pleased with it. You can see my color dominance changed. See how you're like, why does that part visually look different? It's because the color dominance changed. Meaning I held my light color in my left hand to my right hand on this section. And then this section I held the light color in my right hand versus my left hand. I mean, this does have more light in it, but it still has like this in the stripy section you can see. But so yes, I'm very pleased with how that turned out. Hooray! Sorry to bother you, Gus. I have another hat ready. So this is the Purl SoHo. So it's their free online pattern, classic cuffed hat. And this is knit with a Louet gems, which I can't find the color for. But again, it's a 2-ply fingering weight. Gems fingering, excuse me. And this is the colorway Burgundy. So this was 100 gram skein. I have this much left, probably 30-ish grams. And so this is a kid's size hat. If you are interested in knitting hats for the asylum seekers of Maine, you can send me hats, mittens, gloves, scarves, cowls. that are superwash. If you send them to me and postmark them by October 1st, I will enter you into a prize, and then I will bundle them all up and mail them to my contact person. Last time I wasn't sure how that was going to work. So what I'm going to do is have you send them to me, and how you will get my address is either if you've purchased something, it's my return address on all my shipping labels. Or if you have not or don't have that or what have you, please contact me either on Ravelry, I'm the Fat Squirrel there, or on Instagram, I'm the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. So the Fat Squirrel, just like it should be on Ravelry, or the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. And the reason I'm asking you to do that versus email is just so that I can see that you're an actual person with a history. So if your account is set to private, I probably will not respond with my address. So if you do contact me those places, I'll give you my address. You can send them to me. I'll package them up, send them to her. If you're sending them to me, you can put a tag on them that says your name and like either your city and state or your state. And if you want to say a few welcoming words, you can do that. But that needs to be exposed, so nothing in an envelope. But you can tag them so that folks can see where they're coming from. And then, so anyway, I'll gather those. I'll send them to my contact person. But if you would rather not go through that, and you would like to send them directly to the organization, this is not the, I don't know that this is the organization she works with, but Clara Parks, has just posted on Instagram the contact information for Maine Access Immigrant Network. It's 237 Oxford Street, Suite 25A, Portland, Maine, 04101. And you can find that information on her Instagram account. Or there it is there. And so if you would like to send accessories to them, you are more than welcome to do so. She does not say, she did not specify that they need to be superwash. I don't know, but so there's an alternative if you don't want to go through me, or you can get them postmarked by October 1st or what have you. So I finished that one, and then I have a second one in progress. This is a single ply Malabrigo, and I apologize, I don't know what the color is because I do love to lose a tag. It's not Malabrigo, it's Maelinetosh. But I don't know if it's going to pick up because it's a crazy hot pink color. But I thought this would be fun for a kiddo. So this is a kid's size as well. And again, just holding it double. I think it'll make somebody have a very bright winter. At least it'll be easy for their mama or papa to see them on the playground. Did you do that when you had little people? I was all the way about the super bright hat because you could find them. So yay that. And so then I have also cast on a Trelawny Shawl, which is a new pattern by Tyne Swedish. She is hosting a knit-along. So you can find her on Instagram as The Cleverest Stitch. But she is doing a knit-along starting August 30th and ending September 30th. So yay! So there is mine so far. Her color choices were gorgeous. Let me see. I should bring up the picture that shows the whole thing. Oh, but I'm the worst and can't find it. So isn't that fun of me to be very unhelpful to you? Here, I'll bring up the pattern page. Or maybe I won't. Because maybe I'm just a giant liar who lies. Oh, come on. There we go. So it is a triangular shawl, striped stockinette and garter. Uses 2 skeins. And so here is mine so far. This is Maelinetosh sock in Wicked. Yes. And then my stockinette section is from another crafty girl. And this is her 50% superwash merino, 50% silk base. And it's the colorway All Knowing, which is a Fraggle Rock reference. Do you remember the All Knowing trash heap? Right. So I'm very excited. The Wicked is like a very purpley brown. In lower lighting, it definitely just reads as brown. but it definitely, it has a lot of purple in it. So I thought it looked nice with the, here's the, another Crafty Girl, which is just this soft combination of warm, rosy mauviness with lots of like very neutral, grayish goodness. So yay. So I'm enjoying that quite a lot. And then also I cast on a foolproof cowl, which is a pattern by Louet Zass. You'd think I'd know this. This is like the 4th time I've knit the dang thing. Louet Zass Bangham. Oy vey. And so it is a cowl that you knit, it kind of has like a shawl beginning and then it's striped on the bias. And it is very fun to knit. Here's one right here. And she has a couple of different options. You can either choose, the original was a mystery cowl and it was fingering weight. So you can either choose to do the original stripe sequence, which she gives you, or you can download the one that's like any gauge, any yarn, you do your own stripe sequence. And so I have knit one of these in handspun that I really loved. And it was not actually a chain plied handspun, so it did still have barber pulling, but it looked very nice on the bias. And I gave that one away, and so I wanted another one. So I recently finished some Knit Spin Farm batlings that I applied with a American Tunis from Tar Hillbilly Farms. And so I decided to cast that on for a foolproof. And so there's the beginning part, and then I'm knitting to this side. So it'll be very subtle striping just because the bats are such a soft color, but I think it looks very fun for the winter. I'm excited about it. Oh, it smells really good. So both this and the Trelawny Shawl are very good mindless knitting. This one is great because you have a very short repeat, but it doesn't feel exactly like a scarf, even though really that's how you're knitting it. But you get to do some increases and decreases on each side. And then the Trelawny Shawl is the same, like very good television knitting, conversation knitting. Not exactly, yeah, it's mindless. I mean, it really is. In that very lovely keeping the hands busy so the mind can calm down way. So yay. So yeah. Oh, and then Shameless Self-Promotion. There's actually an update in the shop on Friday, September 13th, which is tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get this out today. And it'll be the last, I think it'll be my last fall update. And then September 20th, I will do a Kersey update. So if you missed out on the last round of the unicorn bags, the I'm Too Old bags, and the Holy Balls bags, I'm going to do another pre-order of those on September 20th. It'll be a sewn to order, so it'll be a shorter window of getting those out. But here are the last of my fall bags. I'm really excited about these. So I did the Halloween bags. They went out. They were so cute. But I'm also really excited about these guys. So these are more, these are just fall in general. Or cozy, really. So, of course, some mushrooms. So this is a sock size bag. It has, and all of these bags just have unbleached natural lining. They are almost all interfaced. So they're quilters cottons that are interfaced. This is the only one that's not. This is a linen cotton. Do you love this color? I love it. And I love it with the eggplant and then that sky blue. I just really dig it. Oof. So this is in the large wedge size. And then back to the interfaced quilters cottons, we have this beautiful gold. Oof. With the purple. I'm secretly like, do I need this made into a dress? I really think that about like 70% of the fabrics. I would have the biggest wardrobe on earth. Are you ready for how cute this is? Oh, how cute. Foxes and owls and hedgies and squirrels and their scarves and hats. And also mushrooms. Okay. Okay. So this is the sweater size. So these are actually interfaced with a lighter weight batting. And then this beautiful floral, which I definitely want clothing made from. All of the clothing, please. Isn't that just gorgeous? Ugh. I love it. And then finally, oh, there's a thread on that, sorry. So cute. In the Aran Sweater size, I have these guys. And I'm really digging this as like a fall transitional winter palette. Like, I'm not usually this pinky peachy kind of person, but I really like it. I don't know what it is. I think it's because it secretly still has the gold, right? And the gray. It's just this lovely and warm, but very peaceful. Oh, it's so cute. So this is a lighter color fabric, so interfacing never looks quite so perfect on it, so just be aware. I do my best, but I actually rumpled this one specifically because I just wanted to make sure it was going to be okay. So it is a little bit more rumpled maybe, but who knows what the post office does to your bags on their way to you. But it does have the darker canvas bottom, so you don't have to worry as much about dinginess. But oh, I just really love this fabric. It's so nice. Anyway, so that update will happen Friday, September 13th. Did I say August? Hopefully not. Yeah. If you see this later in the weekend, still check it out because I did not advertise this update at all. Because I'm a poor businesswoman this week. But you know, sometimes life just happens. Kids get sick, phones get broken. It's okay. It got fixed and it was under warranty. You know, life and stuff. Okay? Okay. Anyway, I hope you have a good week. And I will be back next week with a homespun episode. And then a regular episode. And then all the good stuff will continue on and on. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.